Welcome to Books in the World, a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center. Books in the World is an interview show produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center to show how writers and others in the literary field play their roles in the world of books. I'm Ray Anderson, and today we are delighted to welcome Madeline Bilis to our show, the author of 50 Hikes in Eastern Massachusetts. Welcome, Madeline.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for having me.
Madeline is a writer, editor, and author. She currently works full-time for Travel and Leisure magazine in Manhattan. She's written a number of articles aside from hiking, but a couple of the hiking articles are historic homes and hikes. Also, she's written an article about camping and kayaking along the Baltic coast. Maybe you can expand a little bit about that and some of your background, Madeline.
That's right, sure. So, yes, I write and edit for Travel and Leisure right now, where recently I have written stories about some of the amazing hikes you can do in Western Massachusetts and historic homes you can tour either before or after your hikes as part of the Trustees of Reservations. And I've also written about a new program that Airbnb started where you can book hiking and camping excursions in places like the Baltic coast.
Wow.
And elsewhere, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before I ask you some questions about your book, I wanted to explain to our viewers a little bit about the format. As a hiker myself, I was very impressed at how organized this book is, 50 Hikes in Eastern Massachusetts, and how the essential information is right at your fingertips. First off, there's a map of Eastern Massachusetts, and all 50 hikes are numbered and appear on the map. So right away, anybody interested in a hike can see where the hikes are. Then the book itself is organized into 4 parts. First, there's west of Boston. There are 15 hikes there. Then you have hikes south of Boston, north of Boston, and finally you end up in part 4 of the book, hikes in Cape Cod and Boston Harbor. Then, for our viewers, after that, there's a few pages in which you speak about the actual hike itself, the region, distance in miles, difficulty, dogs allowed, yes or no, good for kids, yes or no, views, and a couple of notes. So this is all listed in front. Then when the viewer, the reader, decides which hike that he wants to take, he can open it up and go right to the information. And what's nice about it is the reader isn't flooded with a lot of information at once. Here's a hike that interested me. It's hike 14. It's Walden Pond State Reservation. I didn't know that you could actually hike an established route around the pond. But what's neat about the layout of the book is, right up front you have a capsule summary in green, the hike, where it is, and the exact address so that somebody could put it right in their GPS and get to it. The total distance, estimated hiking time, if there are restrooms, all these things that the reader would want to know. Then a brief history of the area for those of us who like to know the area where we hike. And then the hike itself. And what's really neat is that each hike has a map. And if you were to tell us a little bit of how you got this mapping, because I understand you did all these maps for every hike.
Yes, yeah. So in addition to writing the book and taking all of the photographs in the book, I made the maps for each hike. And that involved me using a GPS tracking app on my phone to track my movements while I was hiking. So I used the data from the app to help create the maps, and I submitted them to the publisher, and they helped standardize them a little bit in terms of style. But yeah, I sketched out each and every map.
That is really great because it's very helpful. I'm looking here, and she's got Walden Pond, and it shows the hike route all around the pond, even the dog leg up to the north, which is where I assume Mr. Thoreau had his cabin. And then after the maps, of course, there's 3 or 4 pages that actually describe the hike with pictures that I guess you took all these pictures and what to expect. So every hike is done in the same format. Did a great job, and it's very, very well organized and quick and easy for the reader and the hiker. So my
Thanks.
first question to you, and perhaps our viewers are also wondering, how long did it take to do all these hikes?
Sure. So I started hiking in April 2018, and I did my last hike in October 2018. So I did all 50 within a few months, which was a tall order.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did them all on weekends pretty much. I took a few days off from my job. So last year I was working at Boston Magazine, where I was an associate editor, and I had been there for about 4 years until I started my new job at Travel and Leisure this year. But while writing the book, I worked at Boston Magazine full time, hiked on the weekends, between 1 and 5 hikes per weekend, and then I would wake up around 5 a.m. on weekday mornings to just type up the summary of the hike and research the history and things like that. So.
Well, that is amazing, because I know you worked full-time, but I know you had to prepare all this, and you did the maps, and you took the photos, so you got up at 5 a.m., and did a lot then went to work, and then, planned out all these hikes. So you're saying that all the hikes were actually done in how many months did you say? Or?
Well, from April to October, so.
Okay, so it was fairly quickly.
Yeah, it was quick.
Intense work.
Intense work,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing 2 to 3 hikes a day sometimes.
Okay.
I squeezed them in the fall because I wanted some
Okay.
foliage photos.
All right, so several in a day.
Yeah.
Did you run into any bad weather? Rain, snow? Or?
Yeah. A few times I had to hike in the rain. Mostly in the beginning, I was worried about not meeting my schedule, so even if it was raining, I would go out. So when I went to Crow Hills in Leominster, Massachusetts, it was pouring rain. I put my raincoat on and I just went out there and did it. I kept my camera under my raincoat and peeked it out when I needed to take some photos. But there were only a handful of times where I was hiking in a downpour. But yeah.
Wow. So you've got a camera, and it may be raining, it could be slippery, and did you have any falls? Did you take a sprain or a tumble at any time?
Luckily, no. And I'm a little bit surprised because there were times where I was walking along a rocky path, taking some notes in my notebook, and I tripped, but I never hurt myself, which was lucky. But I was also very cautious. I wasn't, just willy-nilly writing notes and running up and down the trails. But yeah.
Well, some of the hikes, looking at the book, some of them were, small mountains or large hills, and you had to navigate those over rocks and roots.
Yeah, there were only a few hikes in the book that I would consider to be strenuous because they're ranked on a difficulty level from easy, medium, and hard, basically. And there are only a few hard ones, just because Eastern Massachusetts is pretty flat. Most of the hikes are leisurely strolls and walks, but Wachusett Mountain, for example, is one of the actual mountains, one of, I think, 2 or 3 that, got your heart pumping when you were doing them. But yeah.
So for that one, you probably did just that mountain that day, or you didn't do any others.
No, thankfully not. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Did you hike with a partner or all alone?
Well, I hiked 37 of my hikes with my best friend Adam. He was very supportive during the whole book writing process, and he has a car, which is key when you live in Boston and need to hike outside of the city. So he drove me to all the trailheads for that and hiked with me, which I very much appreciated. So yeah, I wrote this book without owning a car. But for the other hikes, friends brought me to the trailheads, and so I think I hiked with more than 20 people throughout writing the book, because it was important to me to bring friends along and to chat with them while I was doing this, because not only was I writing this book about hiking, but I had the chance to be out in nature 50 whole times in 1 year, so I took it as an opportunity to connect with some of my friends.
I like that idea. So you actually hiked with 20 different people throughout the whole...
I think even a little bit more than that. And family members too. So I had some family visiting from California, and when they came out here, we did a hike. I hiked with my mom and my brother, my best friend, coworkers from Boston Magazine. I got, the whole gang in there. And everyone who did hike with me is mentioned at the beginning of the book, including 2 babies.
Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. On your hikes, did you always meet others, or was you sometimes alone by yourself, or with your friend, or in a group?
Right. There were 3 or 4 hikes that I did by myself.
And you didn't meet anybody on the trail?
No, I did. I usually met a few people on the trail. The last hike I did, which was Noanette Woodlands in Dover, Massachusetts, I did by myself. And at the top of Noanette Peak, I met some women, and we got to talking. And I told them that it was my last hike for the book, and they took my photo, and it was,
nice.
and that was neat. But yeah, I met some characters. I met a man atop Mount Wachusett who asked me how my book would be different than all the other hiking books out there. So he challenged me a little bit, and I told him it's for, people who live here who want to explore their own backyards, right? And that's what I love about this book, and what I loved about writing it is I've lived in Eastern Massachusetts all my life until this year. And it gave me the chance to discover all these wonderful things that I had never even known about in all these years of living here. And that's on and off the trail too, right? So I had ducked into some antique shops in little towns that I had never been to before, and I sampled a lot of pizza from houses of pizza across the state. So there are a lot of gems that I discovered while doing this, and I hope other people can do it too.
Yes. Well, I'm curious, did you ever get lost?
Sure, plenty of times. And that's part of the fun. It's a little bit stressful when you have a GPS tracking your every move and you're supposed to make a map from it. But that is inevitable, I think, and as long as you have a trail map with you and maybe a compass if you need it, and your phone, sometimes there's no cell service, so the phone's not much of a help. But you really have to pay attention to those markers on the trees and retrace your steps if needed. But yeah, every time I got lost, I was not lost for a significant amount of time. But,
Well, you mentioned the markers on the trees, the blazes, and other things. I've noticed in some of the hikes I've taken that some of the parklands, the blazes are very sharp, easy to see. Others, they've faded a lot. Did you run into any hikes where the signage wasn't good, or the blazes were faded? Or? Yeah,
I remember specifically at Ames Nowell National Park, not to name names here, but I guess I am.
Norwell, is it?
Yes, Norwell, near your house. But we had been searching for this one marker for a long time, and we thought we must have passed it, and there were just some branches that were covering it up, which I noted, I think, in that chapter. So sometimes you just really have to keep your eyes peeled, or else they will escape you.
It's funny you mention that, because when I was hiking the Bay Circuit Trail, it did go through part of Ames. And I recall now, it was near my house. I live in Hingham, and I said to myself, how is it that I'm having trouble navigating over here in Norwell, which is very close to me? But I seem to recall having trouble there. And I guess some parklands, they've haven't trimmed some of the areas, so it covers the blazes and all. So I guess,
and it depends on the season too. If it's the height of summer and there's green, leafy, lush vegetation everywhere, it might be harder than if you're in late fall when the leaves have fallen and the branches are not covering stuff up.
Well, interesting. Now the Bay Circuit Trail does intersect with a lot of these hikes, and I did that, and that's what drew me to your book, because a lot of it intersect with that trail. Interesting. I want to ask you, did you see any, we are discussing today Madeline Bilis's book, 50 hikes in Eastern Massachusetts, for viewers of me tuned in late. Did you see any wildlife or unusual, did you see a bear?
Did I see a bear? No, I didn't see a bear, which I consider
Everybody asks me, did you see any bears?
I didn't see any bears. You know what I did see, though, is a harbor seal. So when I was hiking the Great Island Trail in Wellfleet, which was my favorite hike in the whole book, it's a 7-mile loop around the dunes in Wellfleet near the harbor, and you go up into the dunes, and through the pitch pines you come down. Anyway, there's a point where you walk along Cape Cod Bay, and towards the end of the hike. And so I was pretty tired by this point, and I decided to take a dip in the bay, and you can see the Pilgrim Monument. It's very beautiful. but there was no one around on this day because I had set out pretty early in the morning.
Right.
And so I went for my swim, and when I came up from going underwater, there was a harbor seal looking me in the eyes. It was probably about 10 feet away. It was a little close for comfort, so I backed up a little bit and just stayed where I was, and we just sort of locked eyes for what felt like a very long time, and then it swam away. And so that was a very neat experience.
Wow, that is interesting because I recall, I didn't read the book word for word, but I checked out all the hikes, and I remember seeing Wellfleet, and I didn't pay too much attention to it, but you say that was your favorite hike of them all.
Yes.
And it was how many miles? 10?
Almost 7.
Oh, okay.
Not quite.
Almost 7 miles. But a lot of it through sand? And
a lot of it through sand. So yeah, you start out on sand and you end on sand, which sounds like it might be easy, right? But after walking through sand and dunes for a while, it starts taking a toll on your legs. And if you're out on the beach, you're out in direct sunlight if it's a sunny day, so it can certainly tucker you out. So that one is killer, and you should get out pretty early in the morning if you don't want to get too hot if you're doing it during the summer.
I'm curious, that was your favorite hike. Any other personal favorites that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so the one I mentioned before, known at Woodlands in Dover, was very easy to get to from where I lived in Jamaica Plain at the time. So it's a great hike for Bostonians who maybe don't want to go all the way to Milton and fight the crowds at the Blue Hills. Known at Woodlands, I think, is a little less busy than the Blue Hills. But I went in October as my last hike last year, and the foliage was beautiful. So you get an amazing reward for not that much work. You just climb up a rocky ledge, and the view is beautiful, and you can see the skyline. And if it's October, you get that beautiful orange foliage. So that's another one of my favorites. There are a lot that I liked.
I'm sure there are. Each hike is, nice in its own way. What makes the perfect hike for you?
Sure. Well, I think the perfect hike has to have a variety of landscapes, because if you're looking at the same thing the whole time, that gets a little monotonous. So I think the perfect hike has a variety of landscapes and also a variety of difficulty levels. So maybe there is one steep climb, but the rest of it is smooth sailing. So you want to have maybe a mossy walk, like a grass-flanked walk, and then it gets a little rockier, and maybe if you're by the coast, there's some sand and sun and water thrown into. And there are hikes in the book that have all three and more, so definitely hikes that have that variety.
I wanted to ask you, and being discreet, but on all these hikes, did you run into any characters or see any suspicious activity?
No, I did not see any suspicious activity. I know I always made sure to lock the car when we set off on our hike, because we did leave stuff in there, but nothing that gave me pause.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, that's helpful. I ask that because you hear about some characters that hide out sometimes in these parks, and I myself have never found any suspicious activity, and I've always run into some great people, great hikers, and I hiked a lot of miles like yourself, so I hope that that's the way it is out there. But would you say that it's best to hike with somebody instead of alone?
Well, it depends, I guess, what your goal is for the hike. If you're going to clear your head and just be in nature and sort of be present, sometimes it's nice to be alone. You should always let someone know where you're going, obviously, which I did do. But I found hiking with my friends was the most enjoyable for me. But it's funny you talk about people hiding out on the trails, because there are several hikes in this book that feature former hermits' caves. So there's one called Ode's Den in the Whitney and Thayer Woods, also near where you live. And it's a little rock formation where a hermit once lived. And there's another one, and the man wrote a book about his time in the woods there. But there are no hermits currently, but historically people were hiding out.
Well, it's interesting because I live in Hingham, and one of your hikes is Wampatuck
Yes.
State Park, and it's a wonderful park, and there's a lot of trails, but I've hiked through there lots of times, and there is like a shack that was made, and it's still there, and I did hike a few years ago by there, and there was a person there. I don't know if he was just looking or if he maybe camped out there or what. But it's good to stay alert.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And
Should be 50 mysterious hikes in eastern Massachusetts.
That's right. That kind of segues into another question. What's next? Are you planning another book or?
Well, I don't know yet. I'm so I wrote this book last year, which was, I think I said earlier, a tall order. This year I'm settling into my new job at Travel and Leisure in New York. Next year, perhaps. I love New England and Massachusetts very much, and I think I know a lot about that subject area, so I'd be open to writing more about my favorite place on earth, maybe next year. I'm not sure yet.
Good.
Yeah.
15 mysterious hikes
50
or
mysterious
haunted
hikes.
hikes?
Yeah,
or,
right?
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed that you have shared a number of your photos that you took on Instagram, which surprised me because I guess I haven't been paying much attention to Instagram. Is there any reason why you chose that?
Well, I started the Instagram, and it's at 50 Hikes Eastern Mass, if anyone wants to follow. I started it so that my family and friends and coworkers could follow along while I was hiking, and general people who were interested in the book when it would come out. So yeah, I would go on my hike. I'd have my camera around my neck. I'd have my notebook in my hands, and I'd have my phone in my pocket. And in between taking notes, taking photos, taking in the trail, I would snap some photos with my phone to put on the 50 Hikes Eastern Mass Instagram, just to show people what it was like to be writing the book. And it also kept track of my progress. So when I Instagrammed the 25th hike, that felt like a really amazing milestone for me to put that on Instagram and have people say congratulations. And now it's sort of an archive of how I experienced the hikes. And I continue to post pictures of the hikes on the Instagram, as well as readers can tag 50 Hikes Eastern Mass, and I'll repost them on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about a blog or anything like that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've had a few blogs over the years. Yeah, still thinking about it. I have written a few articles for Boston Magazine, Yankee Magazine, and a few other sites about what it was like to do these hikes. So, yeah.
Well, I also wanted to ask for our viewers, you mentioned your favorite hikes, the most difficult hikes. Which are the most popular hikes, would you say? Children and pets and all. What popular for someone that wants to?
Well, if you've never hiked in this region, for example, the Blue Hills are extremely popular and very picturesque, I would say. Start somewhere like there because they're pretty iconic in terms of hiking in Massachusetts. I love Mount Wachusett, and it's always pretty crowded there too. I think because you can also drive to the summit if you want to.
Right.
Let's see, Miles Standish State Forest was a wonderful one, and I saw a lot of people there. And those are a few of the classics. But I would, if you're a fan of coastal hikes, which I am, the Cape Cod and Boston Harbor Islands hikes are beautiful, as are the ones in Rockport and Gloucester.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's some Halibut Point State Park is in an old granite quarry, and that one's very beautiful.
Right.
And the Boston Harbor Islands hikes are amazing, and they're popular but lesser traveled. You have to take a ferry to get to them, which makes it more of an intimate experience, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I know our time is drawing a bit to a close, and I did want to thank you again for coming in and sharing your knowledge today of the parklands and trails in eastern Massachusetts. Madeline's book is available online as well as bookstores now, and if it's not on a shelf or it's been sold out, bookstores will be glad to reorder it. And it's
What?
just been out how long? About
So it came out in August
Okay.
2019. Yep.
2019.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's only been out a few months, and
Yes.
I've seen it around quite a bit. You can order it online as well. And for the benefit of viewers, I wanted to leave them with an anonymous review that I took off the internet regarding 50 hikes in eastern Massachusetts by Madeline Bilis. I have a granddaughter named Madison, and I apologize. Madeline Bilis. This is from a person who read her book and what they put online. I've done 7 of the hikes so far, from Mount Watatic in the west to Nescatucket Bay in the south to Maudsley State Park in the north, with a few others in between. The guide is well written and informative, and the directions are easy to follow. The 50 hikes are of varying degrees of difficulty and in diverse terrain. I've enjoyed visiting places I would otherwise never have thought to visit. My sentiments exactly. Thank you, Madeline,
Thank you
for
so
coming
much.
today. And I thank our viewers. I'm Ray Anderson. This is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center, Books and the World. Thank you.